Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today for Healthy Living Together. Today's session is being brought to you by all the partners of Healthy Living Together and being presented by MSU Extension. Before we get started with our presentation, I wanted to share a couple of resources MSU Extension has that can be helpful when you are doing food preservation or food safety. And the first resource is our Think Food Safety Facebook and Instagram page. So we invite you to follow us if you are on those platforms. It's a great way to stay connected, to learn more about upcoming programs, learn more about food recalls, get information on food preservations and on how to keep food safe. So it really is a great resource that we invite you to follow us and share as well. Also, we have a food safety hotline that can be helpful. So if you have a question about food safety, please give us a call Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Call 877-643-9882 and you will talk to a person. So we will answer your questions that way. Plus, there is an option to send us a question via email through Ask Extension. And that's a great option as well if it's after hours and the hotline's closed, and you will get an email response. So just resources for you to be aware of and to allow us to help you answer questions and keep your food safe. The last thing I want to share is we do offer preserving classes on most Thursdays online at both 1 and 6 p.m. They are free classes, and you'll notice with the upcoming topics that we try to keep it quite seasonal to what's growing and being harvested here in Michigan. So a great way to get more information on how to safely preserve lots of Michigan produce that will be available now through the rest of the growing season. So you can scan that QR code if you'd like information on joining those free classes. All right, so today's session is preserving fresh summer fruit. So again, thank you to the Healthy Living Together committee made up of many organizations in Sanilac County bringing these educational sessions to you every month. And so today with preserving fresh summer fruit, my name is Lori Messing. I'm a food safety educator with MSU Extension. And so in Michigan, fresh summer fruits have been around. We already had rhubarb and strawberry season. Cherries are still available in some parts of the state, but other berries like blueberries are just coming into season now. Raspberries coming next, and then peaches, pears, plums, melons, and even apples later on through the fall. So while we love eating these fresh fruits through the summer, whether from your garden or a local farmer's market, or maybe you have a you-pick experience and you go pick your own, it can be also great to preserve this fruit so you can enjoy it all winter long. So let's start off talking about freezing berries. So we'll talk about um, freezing berries using tray freezing with blueberries, but this process can also work for strawberries and raspberries and other fruit as well. Whenever we're preserving, we encourage you to look for fruit that is fully ripe, firm, berries that are well colored. High quality produce is what we're looking for. You want to remove any that are immature, defective, get rid of any stems, any bad berries before we get ready to freeze. Now with blueberries, it's actually not recommended to wash berries before freezing because they can become tough if you wash them before freezing. So in this example, we'll take those blueberries and we'll lay them out on a tray, a sheet tray of some sort, and then put them in the freezer and let the berries freeze individually. After they're individually frozen, then you can pour them into containers or freezer bags. This allows the berries to kind of have that individual freeze so they don't all clump together. And it also then will let you just pour a certain number of berries out of a container or a bag. So if you only need a half a cup of blueberries to make some pancakes one morning, or if you need, 1 cup of berries to make some muffins, they will be individually frozen and not all clumped together. Now, this method does work for other berries, strawberries, raspberries as well. Those berries, though, you would wash first. And after you rinse them under running water, drain them through a colander, but blot off any excess moisture because as you probably know, water is not our friend when freezing. So we want to try and blot off all the excess moisture we can. And then after you put the berries into bags, or you can label the bags before as well, but you need to label it so that way you know what is, from this year, what is from last year. Maybe you have fruit from a couple of years in the freezer. So labeling is really key when it comes to preserving. Another thing you could do with blueberries is you can make blueberry syrup. This recipe for blueberry syrup is from the Ball Guide to Preserving, so you'll find that in that book that you can purchase in many retailers or online. And you can use either fresh or frozen berries to make the syrup. So it's berries and water, lemon zest and sugar, as well as bottled lemon juice, and then just the jars. So not too many ingredients. And with this recipe, we did wash the berries first because we're going to use them immediately to make syrup. And so we will start by making juice from the berries by heating the berries up with water and then letting them drain into a stainless steel pan. This will allow the juice to strain out of the berries. And then you would want to next add the sugar and water, or then you would start with your sugar and water, dissolve the sugar, so bring it to a boil to dissolve the sugar, and bring that water-sugar mixture to 230 degrees Fahrenheit. Once it's up to that temperature, you'll pour that water-sugar mixture into your berry juice and bring it back up to temperature. And then you'll fill your jars, and this product would process in a water bath canner. It is a high acid food, so we would use our water bath canner to process. So let's take a look at what that would look like. I'm going to show you just a short little video snippet here showing you what it looks like and how to use your water bath canner. Using a water bath canner to preserve high acid foods like fruits, pickled products, acidified tomatoes, and jams and jellies is a simple process. Start by filling the canner half full of water and put the lid on the canner. Preheat the water to 140 degrees Fahrenheit for raw pack and 180 degrees Fahrenheit for hot pack foods. Once the water's hot, remove the lid and carefully place filled jars onto the canner rack. A rack is necessary to keep the jars off the bottom of the canner and prevent breakage. After jars are placed on the rack, lower the rack down into the canner. There must be 1 to 2 inches of water above jars for proper water circulation during canning. If not, add more water and place the lid on the canner. Processing begins when the water comes back to a full rolling boil. Set your timer according to the research-based recipe. When the timer goes off, processing is done, so turn off the heat, remove the canner lid, and wait 5 minutes to allow for cooling. Next, lift the rack out of the water and remove jars using a jar lifter, being careful not to tip them. The water on the lids will evaporate. Place the jars on a towel, cutting board, or rack to cool. After 12 to 24 hours, once jars have sealed, label each jar with the date and name of the product. If a jar did not seal, you have the option to reprocess using the same processing time, freeze, or place in the refrigerator and consume. To store your jars of canned food, remove the ring, place in a dry, dark area, and use within 1 year. All right, so just showing you what a simple process using the water bath canner is. And so the jars we filled with that blueberry syrup, we would process in the water bath canner. And when they're done processing, here we've got blueberry syrup. After the jars sit for 12 to 24 hours, then you would label and date those jars as well. Because just like with freezing and canning, we also want you to label and date everything so we know what's from year to year and we can use up the oldest item first. So that's a great tasty recipe you can imagine using on waffles or on angel food cake or on different ice cream even. The next blueberry idea to try would be a spiced blueberry jam. and this is a recipe from the National Center for Home Food Preservation, and I'll share those resources with you in a bit. The recipe calls for berries and bottled lemon juice, nutmeg or cinnamon, sugar, water, and this one uses powdered pectin. So with jam recipes, they're all a little different. Some use powdered pectin, some liquid pectin, or some have no pectin, but this one uses the powdered pectin. And so the spiced blueberry jam would be mixed together, and then you'd add the pectin to that. And processing time is only 5 minutes in the water bath canner. So with these jams and jellies, they also often have a very short processing time. So this is a great jam that you can use for many items, whether at breakfast or even, adding it onto the inside of cookies and things like that. So another great resource for you to try. You're going to get a lot of great ideas in the session today. Let's talk about peaches for a minute. A lot of people enjoy canning peaches, and you can can them in halves or slices using either a raw pack or a hot pack. So with canning, when it says raw pack or hot pack, you want to follow your research-based recipe. And if it says raw pack, then you need to follow the raw pack, which means putting the raw peaches in the jar and then pouring a boiling liquid over the peaches. With the raw pack, you will get less fruit in the jar, and the peaches will float because of the trapped air in the cells of the peaches. But the peaches will be firmer. So if you like a firmer peach, you could do the raw pack. The other option is a hot pack. And with a hot pack, that means that you are bringing the peaches to a boil, either in water, syrup, or juice. And the hot pack allows you to get more fruit into a jar because the peaches have started to soften. So either way, follow the research-based recipe, and sometimes it will only say raw pack, or sometimes it will only say hot pack. Then you need to follow that recommendation. But if it says raw or hot, you can choose what you prefer. And so when we process these peaches, they only process for 20 minutes for pints or 25 minutes for quarts. So they don't have a super long processing time. One thing to note, though, is that white flesh peaches or nectarines cannot be canned, home canned, due to their pH level. So when you think about canning a peach product, make sure it's not white flesh peaches or nectarines. You could freeze those if you wanted, but they are not able to be canned. Now, peaches and pears darken quickly when exposed to air. So when you slice them open and cut them open, you might notice that, like apples as well, that browning can occur. So you do have the option, and it's not required, just an option, to use an ascorbic acid or vitamin C, which can prevent discoloration in most fruits. So it preserves natural color and flavor, but it also adds nutritive value as well. And so the product you see on the screen is one example of a commercial product you can use that's sold pretty much anywhere you buy your canning and freezing supplies. And again, this is optional. You can do it or not. It's up to you. It's not a food safety issue if the peaches or pears have that color change. It might not look as appealing, but it's not a food safety issue. So you can determine whether you want to do that or not. Just follow the directions on the package for how to use. You'll soak the fruit in that solution for just a little bit. Now, another example of using peaches, and this is a really tasty one. If you like salsa, this is a sweet salsa. So it's a peach apple salsa. This is also from the National Center for Home Food Preservation, and it has tomatoes and onions and peppers, peaches and Granny Smith apples, and there's a pickling spice, as well as canning salt, red pepper flakes, brown sugar, and 5% cider vinegar. So whenever we do a pickling, we use a 5% vinegar product. And so this is a recipe that, again, smells so good once you are preparing it. So we'll start off by skinning the peaches. And you would do this when you're canning peaches as well. I didn't mention that, I guess, but this process of scalding and skinning the peaches, put an X called scoring. So put an X in the bottom of each of your peaches and then drop them into boiling water for about 60 seconds and then put them right into ice water. And the skins will just peel right off, really nice and easy. And then you would slice or have them for canning, or in this case, we're going to dice them now to add into the peach apple salsa. But here we did choose to put those peaches into the anti-darkening solution for a little bit. They soak for 10 minutes in that solution. And then we are going to put them into 1/2-inch cubes and then add all the ingredients together. And in the little white bag near the top of the middle picture, that's your spice mixture. And then we are going to stir all those ingredients together, bring it all to a boil. A couple of my colleagues make this and says it tastes so good and it smells so great. You'll simmer for 30 minutes after it's been brought to a boil, and then it's ready to add into your hot jars. And so we would add the peach apple salsa into our hot jars, leaving a 1/2-inch headspace, and hot pack in the water bath for 15 minutes. So just a fun twist on a salsa, a sweet salsa instead of a savory. A lot of people enjoy making pie filling and doing their own home canned pie filling. So whether peach here as this example, or I have some friends who do apple pie filling and they can quarts of that and they're able to just, make or get a pie crust through the winter and the fall, open up the can of pie filling and you have a pie ready to go in the oven very quickly. So another alternative, especially if you have a lot of peaches or apples, or you could do it with some other fruits as well if you find a research-based recipe. So we would start off again with our peaches that have been scalded. We would slice them into slices in this case. Use that anti-darkening ascorbic acid to prevent browning. We would boil the fruit for 1 minute. And then this recipe does call for clear gel, which helps with that thickener solution. So water, sugar, and clear gel is included. And then if you want to add cinnamon or nutmeg, you can use that choice as well. But just again, a fun idea for using some products to make something that we can enjoy later on. So these would process for 30 minutes in your water bath canner, leaving 1-inch headspace. You could also freeze this pie filling if you wanted to as well. So you could do either or. But again, just a great way to use that peaches that taste so good in the summer. You can also freeze peaches. And when it comes to freezing, we would again scald those peaches and remove the skin. One great thing about peaches is you can freeze them in a syrup solution, and you can choose what kind of syrup solution you'd like to use. A lot of people enjoy canning because they can control the ingredients that they are consuming. And so if you're trying to cut down on sugar or trying to cut down on salt in your diet, you have the opportunity to make some of those choices when you're home preserving. So in this case, with freezing fruit or canning fruit even, when we can peaches, you can also determine if you want to use a very light syrup all the way up to a very heavy syrup. And you can see the difference in sugar amounts on that slide. Or you can freeze in water or 100% fruit juices as well. So if you prefer to do that, but you have options. And so that's really nice to be able to do. When you're preparing peaches to freeze in a syrup pack, we would have our peaches ready to go, as we talked about. We would choose our syrup solution we're going to use, and then we can add them to the container, the peaches, add the syrup on top or the 100% juice. And what you'll see here in that third picture is actually a piece of crumpled parchment paper. And the reason you see that is because this way, if you put the parchment paper in, it will hold the peaches, sliced peaches, underneath the syrup. So that way the peaches at the top don't darken if they pop out of that syrup solution. So again, you don't have to do that, but it's just a way to keep all of the peaches underneath the syrup so they all look nice when you freeze them and go to enjoy them. So this is freezing in a syrup pack. You could also freeze in a sugar pack. To do this, you would add about 2/3 a cup of sugar to each quart of fruit and mix it well. If you let it stand for 15 minutes, you're going to see a little syrupy solution, sugar solution start to appear. So it'll make its own syrup when you do the sugar pack like this. So you can also use ascorbic acid here to slow down the darkening. But again, just another way to preserve peaches by freezing. The last way is doing a tray pack, and this is what we did again with the berries earlier. So you can also spread a single layer of prepared sliced peaches on shallow trays and freeze. And like before, once they're frozen, you can package in any quantity, any container type, anything that you'd like to do. So you can label it accordingly. And I would encourage you to think about that. I mentioned how important labeling is, but if you're doing variations of the same fruit, again, you might want to label, the sugar pack peaches, July of 2026, syrup pack, light syrup, peaches, July 2026. So just so you know what you have, and because things can start to look the same sometimes in the freezer. So labeling can help you figure out what you have and what you want to do with it. And here's just an example of some frozen peach halves that were then grilled and served with ice cream and a little drizzle of Michigan honey. So you can, use these products in many ways. Grilled fruit is another really popular item in the summer. Great way to get some nutrient value from your fruits. And so another option for using that. All right, let's talk about raspberries. So this is an example of a raspberry jam without added pectin. So you would just use crushed raspberries, 6 cups of sugar, and you're going to combine the sugar and berries and boil slowly until the sugar dissolves. And then the trick with this is when you're not using pectin, you've got to be stirring and watching it really close so you can get it to the gelling point that you want. If it ends up being too runny, you're going to have raspberry syrup. You won't have thicker raspberry jam. So you have to really monitor and maintain that and watch for that gelling point. They say that if you take a spoon, just a spoon out of your kitchen and put the jam mixture on the back of the spoon, if it stays on the back of the spoon, then the gelling is about complete. If it, runs off, then it's not quite ready. And then with the raspberry jam, you would add it into a hot jar, leaving a 1/4 inch headspace, And you also want to sterilize the jars when we make jams, because anything that processes less than 10 minutes, we should sterilize the jars by boiling them in water for 10 minutes before we fill them. And so you would process these in your water bath canner for 10 minutes. Let's take a look here, a video on preserving raspberries by freezing in jam, just a short little segment from our colleagues in the University of Maine Extension. So I'm going to play this.
Hi, I'm 𝗟𝘂𝗿𝗶𝗲, Extension Educator with the University of Maine Cooperative Extension. Summer is at its peak in Maine, and today we're going to talk about how to use fresh raspberries. Raspberries, whether from your own backyard, your local farmer's market, or farm stand, are vitamin-rich and fiber-packed. Freezing is a simple, inexpensive, and quick method of food preservation. Why not take advantage of those raspberries when you have a bunch of them available so you can have access to them later on in the winter when local raspberries are no longer available? You do not need to pack your raspberries in a sugar or syrup solution. Materials to freeze in need to be moisture vapor resistant, very durable and leak proof, and not become brittle and crack at low temperatures. You want to protect your foods from developing off flavors or odors and make sure they're easy to seal and easy to mark with the date and label. With clean hands, clean equipment, and a clean work surface, you're ready to start. Raspberries are very perishable and need to be eaten or preserved within 2 days of picking. Raspberries should be of best quality at optimum maturity and freshness. Sort raspberries to remove any spoiled or crushed fruit. Rinse very gently under cool running water. To improve the quality of your frozen product, remove water by spinning in a salad spinner, placing on paper towels or clean towels. Remember, excess water creates clumped berries that are hard to break up and use. Pack into freezer-grade material, leaving headspace for expansion that occurs during freezing. Label, date, and freeze in a freezer set at 0 degrees or lower. Keep a thermometer in your freezer and check the temperature frequently. Remember, berries should be used within 8 to 12 months. A tray pack is an alternative that may make raspberries easier to use later on. Simply spread berries in a single layer on shallow trays and freeze. When frozen, remove from the tray and pack in freezer-grade packaging. Frozen berries can be used in your favorite recipes, including pies, quick breads, smoothies, shortcake, and frozen berries can even be used to make your own homemade jams and jellies. When serving frozen fruits, serve them while there are still a few ice crystals in the fruit. This helps compensate for the mushy texture frozen fruits have when they are fully thawed. Fresh raspberries can also be preserved by canning in water, juice, or syrup using a boiling water bath to safely process. Raspberries also make a delicious jam or jelly. I encourage you to try a low or no sugar pectin product for jam or jelly making to help reduce the amount of added sugar you use. Also, consider preserving raspberries in homemade berry syrup to use on pancakes or flavored vinegars to jazz up salads or other vegetable dishes. Try dehydrating to make fruit leathers with Maine raspberries as well. There are many options for preserving raspberries so you can enjoy the flavor and nutritional benefits of Maine raspberries year-round. UMaine Cooperative Extension is your go-to resource for the latest USDA.
All right, so I just wanted to show you that some of those visuals I think are nice, and some good points about using low sugar alternatives, which are available now with some of the pectins. So if that's interesting to you, you can check those out. And just having those options, you know, as far as how you want to utilize those great tasting berries. So Michigan raspberries are super tasty as well. Let's see here. So you can also do a freezer jam, and with freezer jam, you can make strawberry freezer jam, lots of other options as well. This also uses a powdered pectin and sugar and water and berries. And so a freezer jam gives you more of like a softer texture, like a spread type of a jam, as opposed to a processed jam or a shelf-stable jam has that more jelly-like jam. And so depending on what you prefer, or maybe you like both, you know, you could try either or. And this is a really tasty one. I really like strawberry freezer jam as well, but raspberry jam is a great option too. I also wanted to mention a fun idea with the chocolate raspberry sauce. So like I said, there's so many different great ideas out there to try. This one, if you like raspberries and you like chocolate, you know, there's all kinds of possibilities. It is already thickened, so it can be served over ice cream or cheesecake or fruit, or use your imagination. Use it for gift giving. It would be a great way to give some nice homemade gifts if you have access to raspberries. And this recipe also is from the Ball Guide to Preserving, and calls for unsweetened cocoa powder, so that gives it the chocolate flavor. Calls for classic pectin and raspberries and sugar and bottled lemon juice. And so with this recipe, it will only process for 10 minutes. So after you combine all the ingredients here, let me look at the next slide. Combine your sugar and cocoa, crush your berries. You're going to heat your berries, and then you'll add the cocoa and sugar, and then you'll mix your pectin, and then add your pectin mixture in, and you will use bottled lemon juice, which is important for the pH to stabilize. So only bottled lemon juice when you see that in a recipe. And then you will end up mixing everything together and letting it boil. So with the 10-minute processing time, this would be another example of a time when you would need to sterilize your jars first. So you do that by heating them in hot water, boiling water for 10 minutes, and then keep the jars hot. And then you'd add that raspberry sauce into your hot jars and water bath for 10 minutes. And there's an example of how it could be used over cheesecake. So one thing we like to do with our programs is share, you know, ways to use these different Michigan fresh fruits and vegetables that are available, different recipes you could try that maybe you haven't thought of. So watermelon also grow in Michigan, and if you're growing any watermelon, this is a pickled product that you could try. This one is a watermelon rind pickle, and our next slide are spicy melon pickles. People love pickling. We get so many questions and requests for information about pickling, and these are just some, interesting ways to pickle using some different products you might not normally use or think about. And so with pickling, we always use a 5% vinegar, and that's included, as well as some water and sugar and some salt, some cinnamon sticks, obviously the watermelon rind. So again, if this is something that sounds interesting to you, this recipe comes from the National Center for Home Food Preservation, I believe. And so you can check that out when I share that resource in a minute. These process for 10 minutes. So there is some time involved in this one though, because after you make your brine, you do have to let it stand for 3 to 4 hours. So this one is not as quick as some other recipes we've shared, because then you also have to let it stand overnight after you pour that brine over the watermelon rind. So this one takes a bit, but could be something fun to try if you find yourself with lots of watermelon and if you like pickled products. And we don't often think about preserving melon, but this spicy melon pickle was a hit last year. One of my colleagues has a daughter who loves cantaloupe, so they found this recipe last year and tried it. And you can see the ingredients there. It's a Ball Blue Book Guide to Preserving recipe, so you can find the full recipe there. But got your melon all cubed up and you ingredients to make your brine, including that 5% acidic vinegar, as we've mentioned, and some spices and some sugar. And then you would wash the melon before cutting it, and then you would cube the melon, combine all the spices in a spice bag or in a cheesecloth, cooking the melon or combining the spice bag, the vinegar, and water in a large saucepan, and then simmer for 5 minutes. Next, you would add the cantaloupe, and this has to sit an hour and a half to 2 hours. So again, a little more time involved in preparing this one. But next you would add the sugar and then reduce heat and simmer until it's dissolved. And this one would also be 10 minutes of processing time into your hot jars. And again, just a different idea, a different way to utilize some of the produce maybe you're growing in your garden, or maybe you have access to from family or friends or your local farmer's market. And lastly, we'll end up talking about pears. So canning pears, that's something I remember doing as a child. You'd wash and peel the pears and cut them in lengthwise in half. Again, you have the option to use the anti-darkening ascorbic acid solution if you choose. And again, you have the option with pears to determine what type of syrup, from a very light syrup to a very heavy, or if you want to use 100% juice or water. Hot pack is recommended for pears, and so you will boil your pears for 5 minutes in whatever syrup solution you choose, and then fill the hot pears into hot jars and process for 20 minutes for pints or 25 minutes for quarts. Now, a note to remember is that if you're canning Asian pears, they require acidification before canning. So you would have to add bottled lemon juice, 1 tablespoon per pint and 2 tablespoons per quart. So if you happen to be using that variety of pears, keep that in mind. A salted caramel pear butter is another way if you have a pear tree and find yourself swimming in pears later on this summer. So you'd use pears and apple cider, bottled lemon juice, dark brown sugar, and sea salt. And salted caramel is obviously a very popular product to begin with, but the idea of combining it with pears as a pear butter, this one sounds tasty. I have not made this one yet myself, but again, we're here to help you think about new, interesting ways to preserve some of the fruits you have access to. And a pear relish is the last one I'll share. Relishes and pickling, as I mentioned earlier, are really trendy, and a lot of people really enjoy pickled products and relishes. So this gives you that sweet, savory type of a relish again with pears and onions and peppers and celery and sugar and spices, and again, our 5% acidic vinegar. So this recipe also comes from the National Center for Home Food Preservation website, which I'll share in just a moment on the next slide. But these process for 20 minutes, these jars of pear relish, and give it a try. If you love pears, we give you a few ideas. If you love peaches, we give you a few ideas. Hopefully you'll leave with a few ideas of interesting new recipes to give it a try. So you've heard me talk about a couple resources. One of our biggest areas we stress in our home food preservation classes is to only use research-based methods, so water bath canning, freezing, pressure canning, or dehydrating, and to only use research-based recipes and resources. So we highly recommend using the resources you see here on the screen. And in these resources on the screen, there are hundreds and hundreds of recipes. So many great ideas. Everything I shared today came from one of these resources, and they're all available either online or available to purchase. So the first thing you see there is the National Center for Home Food Preservation. You can simply internet search National Center for Home Food Preservation, and the website will come up, and there's a little drop down. You click on canning, you click on freezing, and then there's subcategories for under canning. It'll say vegetables and fruits or pickles or jams and jellies. You'll find, like I said, so many great recipes. They produce a book called So Easy to Preserve, which is kind of in the middle of your screen there. You can purchase those online. They're about $35, but it's like a 400-page book. So there's, again, so many great recipes. All research-based, all tested for safety. On the top middle, the U.S. Department, the United States Department of Agriculture, their Complete Guide to Home Canning. You can purchase that book on Amazon, or you can download all the contents of that book, all the recipes from the National Center website. The bottom middle there is the Ball Guide to Preserving, and that's the newest edition that came out in 2024. And this is the one we would recommend you use. There's a lot of older Ball Blue books floating around, but research has changed, methods have changed, produce has changed. So the recommendations have changed, and we want you using the most current version. So if you find older books in your home or with family or friends, use the new one. It's about $14. You can get those pretty much anywhere they sell preserving supplies. So at grocery stores or hardware stores, or Costco, Meijer, Walmart, Sam's Club, all those types of places usually have them. Even online, you can find them. So that's another good resource. And then on the far right, we have our Michigan Fresh Fact Sheets. And so we have a fact sheet for almost everything that grows in Michigan, how to safely use, store, and preserve all of that great produce we have available. And so I just put the samples of raspberries and peaches up on the screen, but you can search MSU Extension Michigan Fresh, and it'll take you to the website, and you'll be able to find all of those fact sheets. Many of them have recipes on the fact sheets as well. And then I showed you one video clip today with the water bath canning. We have some more video clips on different parts of canning and using a pressure canner and a few other things. So they're on our home preserving YouTube page through MSU Extension. So lots of resources. Hopefully we've inspired you to think about some new ideas and new ways to prepare maybe produce that you grow every year, and you're looking for some inspiration. And hopefully also you'll check out some of these resources and see all the options that are out there, so you can use a research-based recipe and know you have a safe product preserved that you and your family can enjoy all through the year, over the years. We know a lot of people learn to preserve from their families or grandparents or parents, and that's okay, but things have changed through the years. And so if we don't stay on top of the changes, we could in turn be, using recommendations that are outdated and unsafe. And with preserving, we want to make sure everyone ends up with a great, safe product. Food is expensive. Fruit is expensive if you buy it. If you're growing it, that's great. But we want to make sure that, the money and time we spend to preserve leads us and gives us a product that we can feel safe, knowing it'll be great and we can safely enjoy it. So thank you for listening today. Always feel free to reach out to MSU Extension with questions. I shared the food safety hotline earlier, or you can contact me at the Huron County MSU Extension office and be happy to answer any questions that you might have. So thanks for listening today and have a wonderful day.